Hello, Symposiast. This is Dr. Angela Puca, Religious Studies PhD and University Lecturer, and welcome to Spooky Season. And what best way to start a spooky season than talking about the history of larvae? Have you ever heard of these entities that can affect your spiritual journey, attach to you, and even cause harm? And is this even true? We will look at the history of larvae through Theosophy and up until the contemporary world. So stay tuned for that. And welcome to Spooky Season.
So let's understand a bit more what larva singular or larvae plural are. And we will also cover the history of the larvae, how they have been conceived through the centuries, where the term comes from, where the concept comes from, and how it has evolved over the years. So stay tuned for that because it's going to be quite a journey. And I thank one of my patrons, Mike, who brought up the subject at our latest Magos lecture on Franz Bardon's initiation into hermetics, because it gave me the opportunity to research into it and then produce this episode for you guys. Which reminds me that my Patreon community is absolutely fantastic and you absolutely, totally want to join us. I also call it my inner symposium. It's a great way to support my work, but it's also a fantastic community to join, and you will find lots of like-minded individuals, both practitioners and scholars. And I really hope that you join and you become part of my inner symposium. Also, this project can really only exist thanks to your support. It is a crowd-funded project. So if you want to support my project and keep it going, if you like the free academic scholarship that I offer over here, please consider supporting me via PayPal, indeed Patron, so that you also join a great community. Also, there's the option of becoming a YouTube member. Super thanking me in the chats, in the comments, I think. And there are lots of ways. You can also find all the services that I offer, my courses, my lectures, tutoring sessions that I offer over on my website, drangelapuca.com. So plenty of ways to support me, and I really hope that you will do so. Now, let's crack on with our conversation today, which is about the larvae. Ooh. So let's start because we've got a lot to cover. So in this episode, we begin by exploring the etymological and conceptual roots of the term larva, which originates from the Latin language. In classical Latin, the word larva referred to a mask or a ghostly apparition. This term was often used to describe malevolent spirits, typically restless ghosts of the dead who haunted or tormented the living. Larva had a negative connotation distinct from other Latin terms like manes, which referred to the spirits of deceased ancestors that were generally considered benevolent, provided they were properly honored through ritual. Also, the books that you see on my slides here are the references. I thought it would be easier than giving you a massive bibliography in the end. Additionally, the term larva shares a connection with the Latin word lar, the plural of which is lares, which refer to household gods or spirits. However, larva indicated something far more ominous. It also had linguistic proximity to the term lemures, which referred to similar restless spirits of the dead who had not been given proper burial rites and as a result disturbed the living. In Roman tradition, these spirits, the lemures, were considered dangerous and malevolent, and the rituals were required to appease or exorcise them, such as those performed during the festival of Lemuria. Over time, the meaning of the term larva began to evolve, especially within different cultural and aesthetic contexts. Initially, as mentioned, larva meant a ghost or mask, and the notion of the mask is particularly significant in understanding how the term developed in historic thought. A mask is something that covers the face, hiding the true nature or identity of the person or entity behind it. In this way, the term larva came to symbolize not just ghosts or spirits, but also the idea of false appearances, deception, and entities that obscure or distort the truth. The symbolism of the mask, of something that conceals the true nature of things, fits into the broader esoteric and occult interpretation of larvae, which in later traditions were seen as deceptive spiritual entities. In occult contexts, particularly from the 19th and 20th centuries, larvae came to be understood as astral or spiritual parasites. These were entities believed to be malevolent, preying on the living by draining their spiritual or psychic energy, or influencing them negatively in subtle but harmful ways. The plural form, larvae, was used to describe these multiple entities that could attach themselves to individuals, feeding off negative emotions or unresolved psychic issues. It is interesting to note that the word larva has also found its way into modern biological terminology. In a scientific context, larva refers to the immature form of an animal, such as a caterpillar, before it undergoes metamorphosis into its adult form. Although this biological meaning is distinct from its esoteric counterpart, it still carries with it the symbolic undertone of transformation and disguise. A larva, in the biological sense, represents a form that is not yet fully developed, still undergoing a process of becoming something else, much like the esoteric idea of an entity that has not fully ascended or reached its final form. Returning to the esoteric usage, larva retains much of its original Latin meaning as a ghost or mask, but has evolved into a more metaphysical concept within occult traditions. In these practices, larvae are often depicted as astral parasites or thought forms, energy beings that attach themselves to people, draining their vitality or influencing their thoughts and behaviors negatively. These entities are thought to be attracted by unresolved psychological or emotional issues, especially those linked to fear, anger, or other negative emotions. Much like the restless spirits of Roman mythology, these larvae were often seen as dangerous, requiring ritual exorcism or cleansing to remove them from the person's aura or psychic field. Now, stay tuned until the end because up until now we have covered the origin and the contemporary understanding of larvae, but we are going to explore how the concept of larvae has been interpreted in various esoteric traditions, tracing the idea through Renaissance alchemy, theosophical writings, and modern occult practices. By examining how these ancient ideas about spirits, masks, and false appearances evolved into the notion of psychic parasites, we will gain a clear understanding of the role that larva and larvae play in both historical and contemporary esoteric thought. To recap, the term larva began as a Roman concept referring to a malevolent ghost or a mask, a symbol of something that conceals true identity. Over time, this concept evolved into the esoteric realm, where larvae came to represent astral entities or psychic parasites that feed off negative emotions or unresolved spiritual issues. Whether in ancient Roman rites or in modern occult practices, the term continues to carry connotations of deception, false appearances, and the need for spiritual purification. To fully understand the development of the term larva in esoteric context, we must first explore its classical conceptions, particularly in Roman religious and folkloric traditions. In ancient Rome, the idea of larvae was closely linked to the broader cultural understanding of the soul, death, and the afterlife. The Romans believed that the souls of the dead could take on different forms depending on the nature of their death and the rituals that were or were not performed for them. Larvae, in this context, were considered to be malevolent spirits of the dead who had not been properly laid to rest. These souls were often seen as disturbed or restless, trapped between the worlds of the living and the dead. Unlike the manes, which were the souls of deceased ancestors who had been given proper funerary rites and thus became benevolent protectors of their descendants, larvae were dangerous and malignant spirits. The contrast between manes and larvae provides insight into the Roman understanding of the afterlife. Those who were honored in death became protective spirits, while those who were neglected or whose deaths were violent became harmful entities. One of the most significant rituals in the Roman calendar related to the appeasement of these restless spirits was the festival of Lemuria, Held annually in May, the Lemuria festival was a time when Romans sought to exorcise the larvae from their homes. The head of the household would perform a specific rite at night, involving the throwing of black beans as an offering to the spirits, while reciting a formula that asked the spirits to leave the household in peace. The repetition of this ritual for 9 days was believed to drive away the larvae and protect the home from their malevolent influence. Apuleius, the 2nd century Roman philosopher and author of the Metamorphoses or the Golden Ass, offers an important literary example of the concept of larvae in Roman thought. In his work, Apuleius describes spirits and apparitions that take on different forms to deceive and haunt the living. Although his text is primarily a narrative of transformation and magical encounters, the underlying theme of spirits disguising themselves or being seen in different forms resonates with the Roman conception of larvae. For Apuleius, these spirits were not merely passive. They were capable of taking on deceptive forms and creating confusion or terror in those who encountered them. The presence of larvae in both Roman religion and literature highlights a duality in Roman thought. While certain spirits could be propitiated and become benevolent forces, others, such as larvae, were considered inherently dangerous and unpredictable. This idea of malevolent spirits who were not properly honored in life, becoming harmful in death, continued to shape the way subsequent esoteric traditions understood spiritual or astral parasites. Moreover, the concept of larvae as spirits who were not at peace influenced later demonological frameworks, particularly within Christian thought. Early Christian writers often built upon Roman notions of larvae and other malevolent spirits, incorporating these ideas into emerging doctrines on demons and the afterlife. The Roman view that the soul's state after death depended on the rituals performed for it found resonance in Christian teachings on purgatory, exorcism, and the dangers of neglecting the proper spiritual care of the dead. Thus, the classical conception of larvae as restless, malevolent spirits in Roman religious and cultural contexts laid the foundation for how these entities would be understood in later esoteric and occult traditions. The annual Lemuria festival, with its rites of appeasement, demonstrated the Romans' deep concern with the influence of the dead on the living, particularly when those spirits had not been properly laid to rest. This understanding of larvae as dangerous spirits who could harm the living through their malevolent presence carried forward into the esoteric traditions of the Renaissance and beyond, where larvae would come to be seen as astral parasites or entities feeding on the spiritual and emotional energy of the living. The concept of deceptive or harmful spiritual entities persisted from Roman times into early esoteric thought, particularly within Gnosticism, early Christian demonology, and Neoplatonic philosophies. While these traditions did not explicitly use the term larvae, they engaged with ideas that bear conceptual similarities to the Roman notion of larvae as malevolent spirits. In Gnostic cosmology, archons were seen as deceptive entities that ruled over the material world and imprisoned human souls, preventing them from attaining gnosis, or spiritual knowledge. Archons were often depicted as cosmic powers or rulers that emanated from the Demiurge, the creator of the physical universe, who was seen as separate from the true transcendent God. While not directly referred to as larvae, Archons functioned as obstructive forces that hindered spiritual progress, a role conceptually similar to that of larvae in Roman thought. Early Christian demonology incorporated elements from Jewish and Greco-Roman traditions, depicting demons as fallen angels or malevolent spirits that sought to deceive and lead humans astray. Christian writers such as Origen and Tertullian described demons as spiritual beings that could attach themselves to individuals, influencing their thoughts and actions. Tertullian, in particular, portrayed demons as entities that could drain spiritual energy and cause physical and mental afflictions. While not explicitly called larvae, these demons were understood as harmful parasitic entities bearing similarities to the Roman conception of larvae. However, the direct absorption of the larvae concept into Christian thought remains speculative. Neoplatonists such as Plotinus and Iamblichus explored the soul's descent into the material realm and its interactions with lower spiritual entities. They emphasized the need for spiritual purification and theurgic rituals to protect the soul from harmful influences and enable its ascent back to the divine. Plotinus described the material world as a realm of shadows and illusions, populated by lower entities that could deceive and entrap the soul. Iamblichus elaborated on this idea, discussing the role of daimons as intermediary spirits that could either help or hinder the soul's progress. While not directly using the term larvae, the Neoplatonic conception of lower astral entities that could contaminate or obstruct the soul resonates with later esoteric interpretations of larvae. The concept of larvae, rooted in Roman myth, underwent a significant evolution as it was absorbed and transformed by various esoteric traditions. Gnosticism, early Christianity, and Neoplatonism all engaged with ideas of deceptive spirits, spiritual parasitism, and the necessity of purification, which bear conceptual similarities to the Roman notion of larvae. While these traditions did not explicitly use the term larvae, their ideas about malevolent spiritual entities laid the groundwork for the more direct association of larvae with astral parasites and psychic attachments in later esoteric thought. The Renaissance and early modern periods witnessed a resurgence of interest in esoteric ideas and a transformation of concepts related to spiritual entities, astral influences, and the nature of the soul. While the term larvae does not appear to be explicitly discussed by key figures such as Marsilio Ficino and Paracelsus, their ideas about spiritual purification, astral bodies, and the impact of thoughts and emotions on spiritual well-being have some conceptual resonance with the notion of larvae. Marsilio Ficino, a prominent Neoplatonist philosopher, explored the nature of the soul and its journey through the cosmos in his works, such as the 3 books on life, De Vita Libri Tres, and his commentaries on Plato's dialogues. Ficino emphasized the importance of spiritual purification and the cultivation of virtues for the soul's ascent towards the divine. While he did not explicitly mention larvae, his idea of the soul's susceptibility to astral influences and the need for purification have some thematic similarities with the concept of larvae as spiritual obstacles or entities that hinder spiritual progress. Paracelsus or Paracelsus, a Swiss philosopher, physician, and alchemist, developed a complex worldview that incorporated ideas about astral influences, spiritual entities, and the importance of maintaining purity in thought and action. In his extensive writings on medicine, alchemy, and philosophy, Paracelsus introduced concepts such as the astral body and explored the impact of thoughts and emotions on one's spiritual well-being. Although he did not specifically use the term larvae, his ideas about the astral plane and the influence of negative thoughts and emotions have some conceptual resonance with the notion of larvae as astral entities born from human impurities.
Just a little clarification that I thought was needed on this point. So Paracelsus, to use the Latin pronunciation, discussed concepts that align with the idea of the astral plane, but he did not use the exact term in the way that later esoteric thinkers like Helena Blavatsky or members of the Theosophical Society did. In fact, you will find on my channel a video on astral travel and astral plane where I explain exactly this, and the whole concept of the astral plane and astral travel really starts with Theosophy and specifically with Leadbeater. So Paracelsus spoke of a realm called the mundus imaginalis, or the world of ideas and images. This realm was understood as an intermediary world between the purely physical and the spiritual, where the astrum, or astral body, which is sometimes called sidereal body, played a role. According to Paracelsus, this astral body was a subtle, ethereal double of the physical body, shaped by celestial influences.
It existed in a realm beyond the material world, connecting the human being to cosmic forces, similar to how later occult thinkers conceptualized the astral plane. In Paracelsus' work, particularly his Philosophia Sagax and De Viribus Membrorum, he describes the astral body as being subject to influences from stars and the planets, shaping a person's health, personality, and destiny. He was a pioneer in blending alchemy, astrology, and medicine, proposing that both the spiritual and physical realms were interconnected through these astral forces. His theories definitely contributed to later esoteric and occult traditions that more clearly and a bit differently articulated the concept of the astral plane. So this really makes Paracelsus an influential precursor to such ideas. The Renaissance and early modern periods saw a revival of interest in ancient esoteric texts and the incorporation of spiritual entities and astral influences into new systems of magic and occultism. While the term larvae may not have been widely used during this time, the idea of thought forms or astral entities created by human thoughts and emotions began to gain traction and would be further developed in subsequent centuries. This notion of the interconnectedness between the mind, soul, and cosmos, and the potential for human thoughts and emotions to generate spiritual entities, has some conceptual links to the idea of larvae as astral parasites or obstacles to spiritual growth. Although the term larvae does not seem to be explicitly mentioned in the works of key Renaissance and early modern esoteric thinkers like Marsilio, Ficino, and Paracelsus, their ideas about spiritual purification, astral influences, and the impact of thoughts and emotions on spiritual well-being have some thematic and conceptual resonance with the notion of larvae as spiritual obstacles or entities. The revival of interest in esoteric texts and the incorporation of spiritual entities and astral influences into new systems of magic and occultism during this period may have contributed to the further development of ideas related to larvae in subsequent esoteric traditions. However, more research is needed to establish possible and direct links and trace the evolution of the concept of larvae in Renaissance and early modern esoteric thought. The Theosophical movement, co-founded by Helena Petrovna Blavatsky in the late 19th century, played a significant role in popularizing the concept of larvae as astral remnants or entities that could influence the living. In her seminal work, The Secret Doctrine, Blavatsky describes larvae as spiritually dead forms that could attach themselves to people's auras and feed on their emotional or psychic energy. Blavatsky's ideas about larvae reflected the growing interest in psychical research and the exploration of the astral plane during this period. However, it is important to note that Blavatsky's writings often blended Eastern and Western esoteric concepts, and her interpretations of larvae may have been influenced by her understanding of Hindu and Buddhist ideas about astral entities and reincarnation. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, a prominent magical order of the late 19th and early 20th century, incorporated the concept of larvae into its teachings and practices. Golden Dawn rituals, such as the Lesser Banishing Ritual of the Pentagram, were designed to remove astral parasites and protect the magician from their harmful effects. While the Golden Dawn's understanding of larvae was influenced by theosophical ideas, it is important to recognize that the order drew from a wide range of esoteric traditions, including Hermeticism, Kabbalah, and Rosicrucianism. The concept of larvae was integrated into Golden Dawn's complex system of correspondences and magical practices, and its interpretation may have varied among individual members and offshoots of the order. Aleister Crowley, a key figure in 20th century occultism, further developed the concept of larvae within his own magical system, telema, or telema, as English speakers tend to say. In works such as Magic in Theory and Practice from 1929, Crowley described larvae as astral entities created by unresolved emotions, desires, or negative thought patterns. Crowley's interpretation of larvae emphasized their psychological aspects, viewing them as projections of the practitioner's own unresolved complexes. The psychological approach to larvae reflects Crowley's broader magical philosophy, which drew from a range of influences, including Freudian psychoanalysis and Eastern spiritual practices. The concept of larvae also found resonance within the spiritualist movement, particularly in relation to the phenomenon of spirit possession. Spiritualist healers and mediums developed techniques for removing earthbound entities that behaved like the larvae described in Theosophical and Golden Dawn teachings. While the spiritualist understanding of larvae shared some commonalities with Theosophical and Golden Dawn interpretations, it is important to recognize that spiritualism drew from a diverse range of religious and cultural traditions, including Christianity, Native American spirituality, and African diasporic religions. The 19th and early 20th century witnessed a significant expansion of the concept of larvae within Western occultism, as evidenced by the influential ideas of Theosophy, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and Aleister Crowley's Thelema. During this period, larvae were reinterpreted as astral entities or thought forms generated by unresolved emotions, desires, or psychic energy, and were seen as both external threats and internal projections that could hinder spiritual growth. The integration of psychological perspectives into the understanding of larvae, particularly in the works of Crowley, reflects the broader intellectual and cultural currents of the time, including the rise of psychoanalysis and the increasing interest in Eastern spiritual traditions. The concept of larvae as astral parasites or projections of the psyche would continue to shape modern esoteric thought and practice, laying the groundwork for later development in chaos magic and contemporary occultism. And now we are at the modern esoteric occultism. So Franz Bardon, a Czech occultist, magician, and student of hermetics, made substantial contributions to the understanding and practice of working with larvae in his influential work Initiation into Hermetics from 1956. In this comprehensive guide to magical theory and practice, Bardon provided detailed explanations of the astral plane and its inhabitants, with a specific focus on larvae as astral parasites. According to Bardon, larvae are astral entities that are unconsciously created by negative thoughts, emotions, or unresolved desires, emanating from the magician or other individuals. These thought forms take on a semi-independent existence in the astral plane and can attach themselves to unsuspecting persons, feeding off their energy and negatively influencing their behavior and well-being. Bardon emphasized that larvae do not possess a will or consciousness of their own, but are instead driven by the energy and intent that originally created them. As such, he stressed the importance of maintaining mental and emotional discipline to avoid unknowingly creating these astral parasites. He also provided practical exercises and rituals for magicians to strengthen their aura, purify their thoughts and emotions, and protect themselves from external larvae. Central to Bardon's approach was the idea that larvae are fundamentally reflections of the magician's own unresolved psychological conflicts and complexes. In this regard, his teachings echoed the psychological perspectives of Aleister Crowley and foreshadowed the integration of Jungian concepts into later esoteric practices. While Bardon's work has been widely influential in modern Western esotericism, particularly in the German-speaking world, it is important to note that his biography and the authenticity of his writings have been subject to some controversy and debate among scholars and practitioners. Israel Regardie, a prominent figure in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn and later an influential author and teacher of ceremonial magic, addressed the topic of larvae in his writings on practical magic and psychic self-defense. Drawing upon his extensive knowledge of the Golden Dawn teachings, Regardie emphasized the importance of maintaining a regular practice of psychic hygiene and spiritual cleansing to prevent the formation and attachment of astral parasites or larvae. He recommended the consistent use of banishing rituals, such as the LBRP, the Lesser Banishing Ritual of the Pentagram, as well as the cultivation of a strong and balanced aura. Regardie's approach to dealing with larvae was informed not only by his deep immersion in Golden Dawn magic, but also by his study of Freudian and Jungian psychology, which he sought to integrate into his esoteric teachings. As a result, he viewed larvae not merely as external threats, but also as potential manifestations of the magician's own repressed psychic content. Throughout his work, Regardie stressed the importance of self-knowledge, psychological integration, and spiritual discipline as essential preconditions for safe and effective magical practice, particularly when dealing with astral entities like larvae. His emphasis on the psychological dimensions of magic and the need for personal responsibility and self-mastery would prove influential on subsequent generations of esoteric practitioners. And of course, we couldn't forget our dearest Dion Fortune, a British occultist, psychologist, and author. She was definitely another significant figure in 20th century esotericism who addressed the concept of larvae in her writings, most notably in her book Psychic Self-Defense from 1930. Fortune's work was influenced by her involvement with the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, her study of Jungian psychology, and her own experiences as a psychic and a medium. In Psychic Self-Defense, Fortune described larvae as astral entities that are attracted to individuals with weakened or compromised auras, often due to unresolved emotional traumas, psychological conflicts, or psychic attacks. She noted that these entities could attach themselves to the aura and drain the individual's vitality, leading to a host of physical, emotional, and mental disturbances. Fortune's approach to dealing with larvae involved a combination of psychological self-work, spiritual practices, and magical rituals. She highlighted the importance of maintaining a strong and healthy aura through regular meditation, visualization, and energy work. Additionally, she recommended the use of banishing rituals and protective talismans to ward off psychic attacks and prevent the attachment of larvae. As a practitioner of both magic and psychology, Fortune recognized the intricate relationship between the individual's mental and emotional state and their susceptibility to astral parasites. She argued that unresolved psychological issues could create vulnerabilities in the aura, making one more prone to larval infestations. Consequently, she stressed the need for individuals to engage in what we would now call shadow work. She didn't call it like that, of course, because it's a more modern term. Self-reflection and emotional healing as a means of fortifying our psychic defenses. Fortune's teachings on psychic self-defense and her insights into the nature of larvae would prove influential on subsequent generations of esoteric practitioners, particularly those interested in the intersections of magic, psychology, and spiritual healing. The concept of larvae as astral parasites or thought forms has continued to evolve and find new expressions in contemporary esoteric practices, particularly within the context of chaos magic. Emerging in the late 20th century, chaos magic is a postmodern, eclectic, and experimental approach to magic that draws upon a wide range of esoteric traditions, scientific theories, and philosophical ideas. Chaos magicians have expanded upon the idea of thought forms and servitors, consciously created astral entities designed to perform specific tasks or embody particular intentions. However, they also acknowledge the potential for these entities to take on a life of their own and become rogue or parasitic if not properly controlled and eventually disbanded. The chaos magical perspective on larvae and servitors is rooted in the belief that the magician's consciousness and will are the primary forces shaping reality. By extension, any thought, desire, or emotion that the magician invests with enough energy and intent can take on a quasi-independent existence in the astral plane, for good or ill. Chaos magicians often employ techniques such as sigil magic, guided meditations, and ritual invocation to create and direct thought forms, and servitors. However, they also stress the importance of maintaining control over these entities and dissolving them when their purpose has been fulfilled, lest they become parasitic larvae feeding off the magician's energy and causing unintended consequences. While chaos magic has embraced and popularized the concept of thought forms and servitors, it is important to recognize that these practices are part of a broader continuum of historic ideas and techniques related to the creation and manipulation of astral entities. From the Tibetan Buddhist concept of tulpas to the psychological theories of Carl Jung, the notion of thoughts and intentions taking on a life of their own has deep roots in both Eastern and Western esoteric traditions. The 20th century witnessed a significant evolution and diversification of the concept of larvae in Western esoteric thought, building upon earlier ideas from Renaissance magic and 19th century occultism. Influential figures such as Franz Bardon, Israel Regardie, and Jon Fortune further developed the understanding of larvae as astral parasites and psychological projections, while also providing practical methods for preventing their formation and dealing with their influence. A key theme that emerges in the teachings of these 20th century occultists is the integration of psychological perspectives and the emphasis on personal responsibility and self-mastery in the face of larval infestations. By recognizing the role of unresolved emotions, traumas, and shadow elements in attracting and or creating larvae, these authors underscored the importance of inner work and self-knowledge as essential components of magical practice and psychic self-defense. Moreover, the rise of chaos magic in the late 20th century brought a renewed focus on the power of the individual will and imagination in shaping astral realities, both intentionally and unintentionally. The chaos magical approach to servitors and thought forms, while drawing upon earlier esoteric ideas, also reflects a distinctly postmodern sensibility that emphasizes the malleability and fluidity of psychic constructs. As we move into our current 21st century, the concept of larvae continues to evolve and find new expressions in the ever-expanding landscape of contemporary esotericism. From neo-shamanic practices to techno-pagan rituals, the idea of psychic parasites and the need for spiritual hygiene remains a relevant concern for many modern practitioners. At the same time, the proliferation of digital technologies and the rise of online esoteric communities have given birth to new forms of thought forms and astral entities, such as egregores and memes, which blur the lines between the virtual and the metaphysical. As the boundaries between the psychological, the technological, and the spiritual become increasingly porous, the study of larvae and their impact on human consciousness is likely to take on new dimensions and challenges. Ultimately, the history of larvae in Western esotericism is a testament to the enduring fascination with the mysteries of the mind, the nature of reality, and the complex interplay between the individual and the cosmos. By tracing the evolution of this concept from its roots in ancient Greek and Roman magic to its manifestations in contemporary chaos magic and beyond, we gain deeper appreciation for the richness and diversity of esoteric thought and practice, as well as the ongoing quest for self-knowledge, spiritual growth, and mastery over the forces that shape our lives. By tracing the evolution of this concept from its roots in ancient Roman magic to its manifestations in contemporary chaos magic and beyond, we gain a deeper appreciation for the richness and diversity of esoteric thought and practice, as well as the ongoing quest for self-knowledge, spiritual growth, and mastery over the forces that shape our lives. Thank you very much. This is it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you watched up until this point, congratulations. It was a long one. And leave me a ghost emoji in the comment. So, yeah, what do you think? Do you have any experiences, thoughts, or studies on the larvae? let me know in the comments. So if you liked this episode, don't forget to smash the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit the notification bell so that you will always be notified when I upload a new video. Also, share my videos around, please, because I'd really love to reach 100K by the end of 2024. So if you can help me with that and share my videos around, I would really, really appreciate it. Also, consider supporting my work with the means that you know that are in my bio, my description, pinned comment everywhere, Patron, PayPal, memberships, super thanking me in the comments, and checking out drandreapuka.com. These are all ways to support me and keep this project alive. Thank you so much. And thank you for being here up until this point. I hope that you stay tuned for all the academic fun. Bye for now.